everybody. Just thrilled to have David here and speak to us. He's a very busy young man. He was elected mayor 1 year ago today, February 13th, 2018. With 78.5% of the vote. That's the highest vote margin for any non-incumbent mayor in over 70 years. He's the youngest mayor of Oklahoma City since 1923. He's the youngest mayor in the nation of a city more than 500,000. And as a member of the Osage Nation, he's the first Native American mayor for Oklahoma City. So, okay, Mayor Holt was born and raised in Oklahoma City, son of a teacher and social worker, and he grew up on our street. He was a playmate of Becky Lindsay, who became Becky Carp. The neighborhood kids, they were good kids. They had a lot of projects. One of them was Worm City. Remember Worm City? You knew I was going to be there. Yeah, were you the mayor? They were great kids. He received a bachelor's from George Washington University and a law degree from Oklahoma City University. David served in the White House and then for former Mayor Mick Cornett as chief of staff for 5 years. He was then elected to the Oklahoma Senate, where he served for almost 8 years. And I only called him and harassed him about the first year or two. Okay, he was a champion in the Senate. I'm so proud of him. For increased teacher pay, how about that? Better public schools, helps us really. More government transparency, protection of domestic violence victims, and higher voter participation. He has received many awards for his service. I could stand up here a long time and read them off, including being named as one of the 10 outstanding young Americans under the age of 40 by the U.S. JCs. He's the author of Big League City, Oklahoma City's Rise to the NBA. I think he's a Thunder fan, maybe. Great book, great book. Mayor Holt has served on numerous committee boards and is a licensed attorney. Again, I could stay up here and read them all day. His wife Rachel is the COO of the Oklahoma Office of Juvenile Affairs, and they have 2 children, George and Margaret. And so I am extremely pleased and proud to introduce Mayor David Holt.
Well, thank you, Judy. Yeah, I mean, she's not lying. So I moved to West Rock Drive in Rock Knoll when I was 4 or 5 years old and lived there for almost 10 years. And so Becky and Andy, Joel, some others there on that cul-de-sac were my first friends in the planet. So I'm so sad that Becky's sick. That's terrible, but give her my love. And I really only came because she asked. But it's great to be with you today. She mentioned it is a bit of an anniversary for me, a year since my election. We had a election last night, as we would maybe be expected to have a year later. That was for half of our city council. We had 2 new members elected, which now, with their election, both of them relatively young, we now have a majority of the elected officials in Oklahoma City. There's 9 of us, the mayor and the council members. 5 of those are now under the age of 40. So it's a somewhat dramatic generational shift happening. Well, I'm glad to have this opportunity. There's probably 2 groups of people we should spend more time educating because you're kind of the tip of the spear, and that's taxi drivers and realtors. You should probably know more than anybody about what's going on in our city because you are actually talking to our relocation prospects and our visitors as much or more as anybody else. So I'm glad I get to just kind of give you a little bit of the state of the city. and then I'd love to take questions, and if you'd like, and take this any direction you want. But let me begin. I just gave a State of the City address a month ago. That was 45 minutes, so I'm going to give a condensed version of that. But it'll be somewhat similar. So if you were there that day, you might hear some recurring themes. But I usually always start with core city services. Obviously, that's going to be, all of this is going to be important to you as realtors, but this certainly is. You know, the city is responsible for the streets and trash service and police and fire and water and parks and transit. And the good news in Oklahoma City is that we do a citizen survey every year, and the results are great. People feel, generally, with a couple of exceptions that I'm going to talk a little bit more detail about, but generally people are very pleased with city services. And in fact, we have this survey said recently, this last summer, that over 80% of our citizens felt Oklahoma City was a good or great place, excellent place to live. And the national average for large cities, which we are, was something like 56% or something. So we were 20 plus points higher than the national average of all other cities. That's a tremendous thing that we can tell people, that our citizens love living in Oklahoma City more than the citizens of virtually any other large city in the United States. So people, we always have to deal with some perception, some outdated, potentially, about Oklahoma City and what life is like here, and maybe our size or amenities. But we can always tell them that whatever else they think, people who move here and live here love it here, and that's got to be worth something, right? The reviews are good if you give it a chance, and so that's good, and a lot of that satisfaction is driven by a high level of satisfaction in the services that the city is providing. A year and a half ago now, we went to the voters with a ballot initiative that was very focused on those kinds of services. It was called Better Streets, Safer City. And on one hand, it added 120 new police officers, or at least provided the funding for that, and we're continuing to expand the force. So that helps with lots of things: response time, service in the fringes of the city. It allows our officers to do better community policing work because they've got more time. They've got more time because they've got more manpower. They're not just running from 911 call to 911 call. So that was a positive step in an area we were already doing pretty well at, public safety, but we wanted to continue to keep pace. But the major aspect, I would say, of Better Streets, Safer City was one thing that we don't always get a lot of compliments for, and that's our streets. And you probably hear about it, you probably experience it. You guys are driving a lot. You see the streets of Oklahoma City as much as anybody. But I want to explain to you, I'm going to arm you with a little bit of information here that it seems like a lot of people don't have or haven't thought through a lot. The reason, this is not like some weird mystery why our streets would fall below your expectations. We are a city of 620 square miles. And to put that into perspective, you could fit Manhattan, Boston, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Miami, and Philadelphia, 6 major American cities, all combined, add up to fewer square miles than the city of Oklahoma City. I know, right? It sounds crazy. You're going to Google that later because you can't believe it. It's true. So take one of those cities, Boston. They've got actually about the same number of people as us, 680,000 people in the city limits of Boston. We've got about 650,000 people in the city limits of Oklahoma City. And they, however, have about 80 square miles, and we've got 620 square miles. So just do the math. You have the same number of taxpayers, essentially. The money for roads is not coming from anywhere but your pocket. And so you have the same number of taxpayers, but a city 7 times larger. So there's a cost to the empty space that we enjoy. If you live in a high-rise, you need 1/10 of a mile of a street in front of that high-rise, and if you live on an acreage, then you need a mile of street to link these homes together, and there's a cost to that. And so it's just kind of no real surprise when we look at that why we've ended up with the situation that we have. Also, I should point out, in our kind of the way that funding is structured in Oklahoma for cities, we can only use property tax for infrastructure, streets. We can't use it for operations. So that's what we do. And so we use our property tax for for streets. And, you know, this is a culture in Oklahoma that prefers a low property tax relative to other places. So again, let's add that into the formula as well. You're paying a relatively low property tax. That's what's funding street repairs, and you live in this massive city. You live in a city so large that oftentimes, and you guys know this better than anybody, around the edges of the city, and I don't even mean the real edges of the city, you have lots of citizens who think they live in other cities. Because, I know you guys, I know your game. Oh, hey, would you like to see this house in West Edmond that has OKC utilities? No, we do not pick up the trash of people who live in Edmond, okay? Stop it. There's no places, there's no such place as West Edmond. So our city goes all the way to 195th or so, you know, in the north part, and you know, northwest goes like within 5 miles of Okarchi, and you know, to the northeast goes, you know, just after you exit Tulsa, you see the sign, "Welcome to Oklahoma City." That's Oklahoma City. We mean it. It's not just Oklahoma City utilities. It's Oklahoma City. You can't physically live in 2 different cities, okay? So, but zip codes and school districts confuse that because we have 24 school districts in the city limits of Oklahoma City. And so, yeah, when you're at 178th and May Avenue, you're in the Edmond Public School District, and the Postal Service has decided to code you with a Edmond zip code. But you are nowhere near Edmond. You live in Oklahoma City. Don't try to vote for the Edmond mayor, dead or alive. They're not going to let you. So these 2 cents? Okay, well, a little election humor there. Anyways, I digress. But there's just kind of another symptom of our sprawl is the issue that people live in Oklahoma City, but think they live in other cities. And it's true down in the south, you know, more. It's true in the west with Yukon. I hate to belabor this point, but you guys are realtors. You're the ones who can tell people where they really live. And we want, you know, it has a real effect, you know, when you think about election day and people not coming out to vote in Oklahoma City elections because they think they live in Yukon or something. And they're not going to let them vote in Yukon either because they don't actually live in Yukon. And we see it, you know, we see it in turnout. In those Canadian County parts of Oklahoma City or Cleveland County parts of Oklahoma City, you know, it's an issue. We want people to be engaged and be aware of the political issues and challenges that face them as Oklahoma City residents. So, I digress. I went all down this road to tell you about street food. So, we have this massive city. What we are able to put out in property tax in a given year is about $100 million. Sounds like a lot of money, but doesn't go as far as it needs to for a city this size. So what we did, I should say, the previous mayor and council did in September of 2017, put for your consideration a sales tax that would supplement the property tax and probably put basically another $100 million in the streets for 2 years and 3 months. That's Better Streets, Safer City. All told, it's $800 million for street repairs. It's the biggest street repair initiative in our city's history. And so I say that so you can repeat this, because I find that civic awareness of this initiative is very low. No matter what I post on Facebook or Twitter, somebody replies, "Yeah, but when are you going to fix the streets?" You know? And we are. You know, we have an answer for that. $800 million. That's as big as Map 3. So, you know, we'll see how that. Once that's all complete in the years ahead, we'll see if that's caught us up or whether we've got to look at some other. You know, inventive streets initiative moving forward. But for right now, we've got all the money we need. I mean, we couldn't spend more than $200 million a year. It's hard enough to manage. So we're working on that. That, of course, that means a lot of construction, you know, around the city. Or I should, construction's the wrong word. It's street resurfacing. And that, fortunately, doesn't take as long as street widening. Many of you, if you were realtors in that kind of West Edmond area in the last few years, probably experienced a lot of that street widening because those streets were not built for, you know, for huge housing developments. They were built as rural roads. And so that was a growing pains process our city went through for 10 years. And those projects do take many months. Street resurfacing should just take a few weeks. But I mean, I get it. You're going to gripe anyways. But I'm just trying to tell you, just trying to tell you that orange is the official color of progress. So I hope that you will be patient and enjoy the fruits of those labors. The other thing that we do from a core services perspective that's maybe not something we've been proud of has been transit. I think same issues, same challenges. 620 square miles, providing high frequency bus service to every block has proved impossible for us. And so about 12 years ago, there was more and more of a voice in the community to do something about that. And so you've seen over the last 10 years a lot of work, some of it may be more behind the scenes. If this isn't your issue, you maybe haven't paid as much attention, but a lot of work in transit. About 12 years ago, our city adopted basically a transit plan that called for commuter rail among the cities, and bus rapid transit, which is kind of this compromise technology between buses and trains that allows people to feel like they're riding on a train. People seem to like riding on trains more than they like riding on buses, but actually it's a bus, so it's more affordable to manage and quietly operate. And then also just better bus service, more buses, more frequency. And then finally a downtown streetcar, because those first three things I mentioned, in theory, are bringing a lot of people downtown, but there's always this question of then what? You get dumped at Santa Fe Station and you have a meeting in Midtown. What are you going to do? How are you going to get there? And so the downtown streetcar, as you may have seen, opened 120,000 riders in the first 6 weeks. It's been great, and it's met that need, so that box is checked. In December, we got our first grant from the federal government for a bus rapid transit line that will go up from downtown up North Classen and then up Northwest Expressway all the way to Meridian. So that's an exciting development. We hope to do more bus rapid transit lines in the future in different directions. We continue to work on better bus service. Last month we started Sunday bus service. That's kind of base level for most cities our size, but we had never quite gotten there. We've never been able to find the funding for Sunday bus service, but now we do. So now we have bus service 7 days a week. And then finally, last month we approved a regional transit authority, the state's first, and that's legislation empowers cities in Oklahoma to create basically a new government, an alliance of cities with taxing authority, subject to a vote of the people, that could create some kind of transit system between our cities. Because right now, our system, Embark is how it's branded, COPPA is how it's run, does not really go to other cities. It's just for the most part, within the city of Oklahoma City. But this new RTA, Regional Transit Authority, will link up Edmond, Oklahoma City, Norman Moore, Midwest City, and Del City. And so they're having their first meeting next week. And we've sent Governor Brown Henry and Mary Malone, two of our prominent civic leaders, to be our representatives there. And we've chosen people of that credibility because this is a really major initiative, and it will take years, and it will eventually, they're nothing without funding, so they will eventually come to the voters of all those communities seeking some kind of funding stream. But these things take decades. It really took a decade to get to the point I just described in terms of the Regional Transit Authority, and we're probably another 5 to 10 years before you see much progress happen. And it's a good thing that visionary people have been working on this, because what happens is otherwise, one day traffic just gets to a point where you're sick of it and you say, I want to ride a train from Edmond to work. And we say, okay, great, we'll have that for you in 25 years. And this is what it takes. And so it's better to be working on it before you realize necessarily that you have the need. So that's kind of where we're at on core services. Another thing I talk a lot about is their quality of life. And in Oklahoma City, that's the main push behind that has been maps. For 25 years, starting with the vote in December 25 years ago, 1993, we started kind of this extra little investment. To put it into perspective, a MAPS penny is raising about $100 million a year, and our annual budget at the city is now $1.5 billion. So it can seem like we're just a MAPS machine down there because that's what we talk about so much. But in reality, it's less than 10% of our annual budget. But that little extra cherry on top has made all the difference, and it's improved our quality of life. It's given people a reason to live here, young people especially. I've started calling this new generation the MAPS generation, because I really feel like I'm a part of it. People who chose to live here because of these investments in our quality of life. And So that street sales tax I mentioned a minute ago, it elapses at the end of March 2020, just over a year from now, which means that, you know, the sales tax would drop a penny, and we have the option, if we want, as a community, which we've done now several times, to look at whether we still have other needs and whether we'd like to go ahead and maybe continue to invest in ourselves without increasing the sales tax rate from where it is today. And so we started that conversation in the fall about a MAPS 4. You know, MAPS 3 is still culminating. We've got, you know, the convention center opening, we've got the streetcar that just opened, we've got the new park opening this year. So there's a lot of exciting MAPS 3 things happening even as we speak. But, you know, once those things open, then, you know, for the most part, the things that we've had to look forward to for 10 years have run out. And I think as a community, we've kind of gotten used to the enjoyment and anticipation of having things to look forward to that we've decided to do. And so I think this community really does want to consider a MAPS 4 package that reflects the consensus of this community and meets a lot of different kinds of needs. So I opened that door in the fall with ideasformaps.com, which you can still take advantage of. It's the number 4, ideasformaps.com. You can go there and submit some thoughts. And in my State of the City last month, I kind of laid out a couple dozen things that have gotten some traction. That's a little harder for me to keep all up here, so I might suggest you look at that. But what I would say from a big picture perspective is I see a trend, 2 different trends. I see one trend of people wanting to see more things around the city, which is understandable. I mean, MAPS 1 and 3 were really focused in downtown, and I don't really make any apology for that. Downtown was a wasteland, and that defines your community. You know, you've got to have a core, and we've done that now, though. I mean, after the opening of this convention center and the park, we'll have a downtown that has all the modern amenities of a great American city. So I think it was right that we did that, but I also think it's right to now look beyond downtown. But MAPS has always been transformational, so I think it's important that we don't spread it so thin that you really don't even see the difference. But I think it's appropriate to look geographically around the city, and there is precedent for that. MAPS for Kids was basically a MAPS initiative that affected every neighborhood. What I also see is MAPS 1 and 3, again, were really focused on entertainment. And in 1993, that was the crisis. I mean, entertainment is obviously inherently superficial, but we found that not having anything to do here was an existential crisis for our city. And people just don't want to live places that are lame, and we were lame. But you know, between MAPS 1 and 3, and Big League City, and the Thunder, and all this, you know, we've obviously come a long way, and it's not the crisis that it was in 1993. We still need to work on it. I don't want to, you know, it'd be foolish to take ourselves out of that competition because that's what we did that put us in this mess. But we need to keep working at it. But again, what I sense is, you know, there's some other things that maybe are rising to the top and feel more like a crisis than entertainment today. And that's, you know, things like mental health and domestic violence and substance abuse and education and homelessness. And so, are there things we can do through MAPS 4 to at least work on that a little bit, you know? And so that conversation is ongoing as well. And if you take the chance, go to OKC.gov/mayor and look at my State of the City, which you can read as well. You might see some of the 24 projects or so that are kind of floating to the top. And as things progress through this year, we'll continue that discussion. Now that we have the council members all in place after last night's elections, all the people are kind of at the table that are going to be a part of that conversation. And so you'll just see that sort of progress over the next few months with the hope for a completed package to be presented to you probably in September for a vote, you know, at the end of the year. So that's the big thing in 2019 is our effort to kind of continue our quality of life investments in ourselves. The third thing I talk a lot about is education. Obviously, as realtors, again, that dictates a lot of you know, the interest that you get from your clients, especially if they have young families. And of course, in Oklahoma, schools and cities are completely divorced. We have no operational relationship. And so, as I said earlier, I actually have 24 school districts in the city limits of Oklahoma City. And because of that, you know, they don't even share the same boundaries. They just really share a word. I mean, the Edmond School District might as well be called the Smith School District. It's not synonymous with Edmond in any way, and it has no operational relationship with the city thing. And it's the same thing with Oklahoma City schools. You know, the Oklahoma City School District is much smaller than the city limits of Oklahoma City and goes outside of Oklahoma City. Star Spencer is in Spencer, not in Oklahoma City, but that's an Oklahoma City public school. So anyways, it's tough. It's been historically difficult for mayors to kind of insert themselves into that conversation. But what I have found is, you know, the political capital in a community really lies with the mayor and council. People, despite our best efforts, have never really engaged in school board races and school board politics, and they have a hard time, you know, engaging with that. And I think that a mayor is uniquely positioned in Oklahoma City to kind of bridge that gap and convene the school district and the city and the business leadership and the philanthropic leadership of the community and have some kind of unified vision. Because right now, you know, we just all kind of go off in our own directions. And we have historical precedent for that. 20 years ago, we did Maps for Kids, which was actually an outcome of a community-wide 3-year planning effort called Project Kids, where, just as I described, community leaders from all the different sort of leadership sectors of the city got together and figured out what is it we're trying to do here locally. And yeah, there's state issues, there's federal issues, of course, but what is it, what's our narrative here in Oklahoma City that we're trying to create for public education? And we're really just 10 years overdue to do that again. You know, that report went in somebody's drawer a long time ago, and I think we've been adrift for too long. So, what I've committed to do is using the credibility and convening authority of the mayor's office to bring this people together. Now, we're all busy. Oklahoma State Public Schools has got their Pathway to Greatness operational vision that they're working on. I've got Maps for, and we all got lots of things going on. But that conversation needs to happen. And so what I'm committed to do is getting that group started this calendar year. And then, you know, we'll take some time and we'll emerge out of this with a unified vision for the future of public education in Oklahoma City, at least for the next few years, and then the next guy or gal will do it again. I think it always needs to be something that we're reinvigorating. The last thing I talk a lot about is the diversity of our city and just making sure that it's incorporated into the decision making of our city. You know, we've had 36 mayors in our city, and all 36 came from the Northwest Quadrant. And I know there's a lot of people who don't live in Northwest Oklahoma City. I'm pretty sure Teresa Moisan is well aware that there are lots of people who don't live in Northwest Oklahoma City. We've had, you know, we've got 60% of our kids under the age of 18 in the city of Oklahoma City are non-white. We've just got all the, you know, the Oklahoman, when they did a survey at the beginning of my mayoral time, they determined that 90% of our boards and commissions were white, and 70% were male, and I'm suspecting a similar percentage were probably Northwest Oklahoma City residents. So I guess what I'm saying is, as a white male from Northwest Oklahoma City, we've had a good run. But it's a big city out there, and we've got to build a bigger table and bring all the quadrants together, and all the. It's not just about ethnicity when I talk about diversity. It's about age. It's about geography. It's about gender. You know, we need to have everybody's voice at the table. I think if we continue to ignore that issue, it would just become a boiling point. You know, I think some attention needs to be paid, and I think you're seeing it happen in elections. You know, where the voters have the ability to unilaterally diversify the voices in a community. But we need to make sure. I need to make sure as mayor that where I can control it. You know, in ways that maybe lie outside the direct democratic process, I'm making those same changes as well. So when it comes to boards and commissions, we're bringing a lot more diversity of ethnicity, age, geography, and gender to my appointments. And just anything I can control, you know, whether it be symbolic or more substantive. Obviously, board appointments are a very substantive act, but you know, just as symbolic as the pictures in my conference room. I had a mayoral conference room. Lots of important people are in there. Lots of important decisions are hashed out in there. And as long as anybody could remember, it was covered in the pictures of old mayors. Well, I respectfully moved those down the hall, and now we have pictures of 20 Oklahoma City kids. And I chose subjects that were demographically representative of Oklahoma City kids, as I described earlier, 60% non-white under the age of 18 in Oklahoma City. So that's a symbolic gesture, but it's a statement about the future and acknowledging what the future looks like in Oklahoma City. And I also use the platform of my office to get all of us out of our bubbles. We all live in our bubbles in a city so physically spread out as I've described. We can quite literally, avoid anyone who has a different life experience than us. But I think if you followed me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, you would be kind of sick of seeing all this stuff all over the city. Hopefully you're inspired by it. But my point being that I take you with me as I go around the city and expose you to things that are right under our noses, but we often sort of ignore and miss out on. And there's a lot of fun, fascinating things that make this an ever more increasingly cosmopolitan and diverse community. And I try to share that with you as best I can. So those are kind of the four things I said. There's a million things to deal with as a mayor on a given basis, on a given day, but those are kind of the four things I try to keep my focus on so that we emerge out of however long this is that I get this honor with some concrete accomplishments and some real progress, and that the city's momentum continues and our renaissance continues, but that everybody feels it, because that's not always been the case. And we want to make sure that everybody in the city feels like they're a part of this renaissance that we've experienced the last 20 years. So with that, I'd be happy to take some questions, or not. I get paid the same. Dude.
It seems like we've got a lot of rooms going online seem to be open. Is there a shortage in our city?
So Judy's question is about hotel rooms, and you're probably noticing, I think you might be specifically talking about the number downtown, right? But everywhere. I would need a hotel expert probably to I'm sure to some extent new hotel construction is replacing old Holt hotels in some cases. What's happening downtown is really interesting because if you went back to the beginning of Max, there was one hotel downtown, and now I've lost count. There's over 20. And hopefully that's because there's rising demand and not entirely just replacing other hotels, or competing with other hotels. I mean, hoteliers are business people, so they're hopefully not trying. They're not trying to oversaturate the market. But all those hotels downtown have been a great blessing. And then of course we have the 650-room Omni Hotel. It's going to be adjacent to our convention center, so we've never had a hotel that size to host conventions. Generally, we think of all these new hotels downtown and maybe around the city as a positive development. New is good, and maybe making it a more competitive environment. I mean, anytime you have competition, generally that raises everybody's game. So if somebody's let their hotels go a little bit, maybe a new hotel will spur them a little bit. But generally, we're happy with that. We think it's a sign of progress and investment and hopefully an ever-increasing tourist economy here in the city. But, we also need one corridor I always keep an eye on is Meridian. That used to be sort of our hotel corridor, near the airport. And we want to make sure that investments there that people have made are preserved and that that's still a valuable place. But clearly, some of the visitor interest has clearly shifted downtown. It used to be Meridian was the only place where there was a critical mass of hotels when there was one hotel downtown. Now there's 20 plus hotels downtown. So obviously that represents a little bit of a shift in the market. But I don't think we want to abandon Meridian. How about gentlemen and then you?
Street lights. It seems like when I went on the weekend, major thoroughfares to see like half of them are on, half of them are on.
Yeah. So we have 34,000 streetlights in the city of Oklahoma City. And when I was in the mayor's office the last time, every day the issue that somebody would call or come in about was copper theft of their air conditioning units. Maybe you've dealt with that. And I haven't followed this issue maybe as closely as I should, but my impression has been that I don't hear about that as much. That maybe, I don't know if the air conditioning industry changed, but it wouldn't surprise me because whatever the case, all of those thieves moved to our streetlights. So whatever it is, I mean, as long as I've been in public service, copper theft has been an issue on some level. And since the time I was at City Hall before, it's shifted from air conditioners to streetlights. So what we've got, we have 34,000 lights. We have thousands that have been broken into and the copper has been stolen. And I really would encourage you, if you see a truck that's not clearly like orange OG&E truck or has a city seal on it or something, the guys are working even if they have hard hats on, call the police. They're probably stealing our copper. Because it's obviously, it is a systematic effort. This is not just like somebody pushing a shopping cart. I mean, this has been hitting, these thieves have hit thousands of streetlights across our city and up and down our interstates. And if you look at a map of where we've lost the streetlights, I mean, it's just miles and miles and miles. Like half the interstate mileage in Oklahoma City has been hit by these copper thieves. And so it's been, if I said to you, hey, we're going to change every streetlight in Oklahoma City and there's 34,000 of them, knowing what you might about government, you say, boy, I bet that's going to take a while. Like years, and that's basically the situation we found ourselves in. So we're talking about an expense at this point of many, many hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe over $1 million. And it's not stopping as we're repairing. So we've even had incidents where we have repaired the street lights and they've been stolen again within 24 hours. So we've even tried. I mean, it's more than you maybe wanted to know, but we've tried theft, things on the market that claim to be theft deterrent, and they've managed to somehow overcome those. It seems that probably the only long-term answer is to start using aluminum. And I'm no electrician, but somehow that's a bit of an option. Aluminum's not as valuable, and so eventually they would realize that we replaced copper with aluminum as we went, and they'd stop stealing it. Probably, but I guess then they move on to some other thing that's got copper in it. But so it's kind of a crazy deal, and I found, again, everybody sees the streetlights out, but didn't really know what was happening or what was being done about it. There hadn't been any really media coverage since I've been there, and there hadn't even been any kind of public report on it. So it was about a month ago, I asked the city manager to bring a report to the council and explain all this in a public setting, and so that did lead to a front page story in the Oklahoma. I know that there used to be a time when everybody read the Oklahoma and you all would be nodding your head saying, yes, I saw that, I read that. But I know the media landscape has changed. But a couple weeks ago, we had a big front page story that described all of this. And we're still monitoring it. I mean, I don't think the status quo is acceptable. The intersection on Hefner Parkway closest to my house has been out as long as I've been mayor. So if you think that they fixed things because the mayor reported it, it's not the case. And so that's 9 months that I've been the mayor. So I think I'm continuing to monitor because it may come to the point where the mayor and council have gotten to divert funding from something else, to speed up this repair process. I'm trying to get a handle on what the pace of repair really is. I mean, if they're going to fix this, it's going to take like 5 years. I don't know that people in Oklahoma City find that acceptable. So it's a shame. And again, I encourage you, if you see something, say something in regards to streetlights, because these seem to be very sophisticated to some extent. People that are hitting our streetlights and stealing the copper. But we're going as fast as we can under the current conditions we've laid out. And again, I'm going to continue to evaluate whether maybe we need to change the pace and put more resources into it. But that's what's going on. It's not like the bulbs just burned out. So I think that's important for people to know. Yeah, so it's about to be a big thing again. What happened was it was a state project, and political winds changed at the Capitol, and they were less interested in it, and there was this ordeal at the Capitol over all of that, and eventually they put forward some funding in conjunction with private funding and city funding, and basically turned it over to the city. Not that the city was looking for it, but that's just the way it ended up. And then there was still kind of a gap, and so the Chickasaws stepped in. And so the Chickasaws are based in Ada, in southern Oklahoma, but they have taken a lot of ownership of Oklahoma City, and it's been nothing but positive for us. So I'm glad for all their philanthropy here in the city. And so they stepped into that gap, and construction will restart this year. So so it's planned to open here in 2 or 3 years, and it really is a remarkable facility. I mean, it's had a lot of money put into it already, and it's got tens of millions more coming. So when it finally opens, and people will get excited again as things start to happen. But when it finally opens here in a couple of years, I mean, it's a Smithsonian quality museum, so it will be. We anticipate it being a big deal, a big draw, and gives people kind of what they're expecting sometimes when they come to Oklahoma City, which maybe we haven't in the past. It's been hard to find kind of a Native American experience here in the city, but now we'll have the best one in America, really, and then in conjunction with the Cowboy Hall of Fame, you can get, or whatever they would call it, you can get a, the mayor's supposed to use the right name for that, that you can get a really great Western culture experience. Over here, is you Teresa, you had something? That's a great question. Thank you. That's one of the Thank you very much. Thank you. Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. You've been in my blind spot. Yes. Yes.
One, do you foresee Oklahoma City in the future possibly be annexing land to surrounding states, like Yukon, Western
Yeah, so the question is whether Oklahoma City would ever de-annex. Of course, now the second part of your question was, you said to other cities. I have no idea if those other cities want the burden we've been carrying any more than we do, So, I mean, a piece of land has three options, here in the metro. It could be in Oklahoma City, it could be in another city, or it could be unincorporated. And some of the very rural parts of our city, may not be in great demand for another city to take on. I have not, to be honest with you, gone in and explored how all that works. I mean, I got enough on my plate. I raise it as an issue so you're aware of it. I mean, I'm not opposed to that idea of some major de-annexation. I mean, you could cut off 200 miles of Oklahoma City out of the 600 and lose hardly any human beings. Very, very rural areas. Oklahoma City, I'll go on this, completely surrounds Mustang and then some, way down to the South Canadian River. The street between the Turnpike and Luther is an Oklahoma City street. So I could go on with these examples, but obviously challenges. It's never anybody's first instinct to give up land. That's basically that and food have been the two driving forces for human aggression for millions of years. So. But nobody ever thinks of that, really, to give up land. One of the reasons for all that annexation was this idea that we would get all the commercial corridors, because in Oklahoma we're the only state that doesn't allow our cities to use property tax for operations, which makes us entirely dependent on sales tax. And so we were trying to get every possible sales tax opportunity that might be out there. But I think after 50 years, maybe we can evaluate whether some of those tracks are ever going to develop in that way. But that would be one thing. People might say, well, I want to give up that intersection. I think there'll be a gas station there someday. And here's a funny kind of thing. I'm very active on social media and I do it all myself. So one thing I've grown very aware of over the last year is the level of frustration of the rural Oklahoma City resident, that their services are not up to the same level as the urban Oklahoma City resident. And their solution, of course, is to increase the level of service. But if I said to them, here's my solution. How about you get no service? And we can put you out in the unincorporated areas. I don't know that that's going to be exciting to them. So, I don't know, again, I haven't looked into the annexation, but to the extent it requires property owner approval, I don't know that, even though they may be frustrated being in Oklahoma City, I think they might not want to be in an unincorporated area either. So, it's a tough issue, and that's why nothing's happened on it in 50 years. But there's lots of ways to research that, but if you read Boomtown, the book that came out last year, that's really a well-written history of Oklahoma City, but by a national writer, a New York Times writer, Sam Anderson. Among the stories he tells is how we went on this annexation binge in the 50s and 60s and took in all of that land. And it's hard to unwind, obviously. But somewhere down the line, maybe a second term initiative. I don't rule out the possibility of having that conversation, but it is not front burner today. And one other complication, we have built a lot of streets and fire stations and things out in those areas now. Unwinding all that, figuring out what's going to happen to all those buildings we've built and streets we've improved. It's a tough deal once you've committed to it to unwind it. Yeah. Yeah.
How can I get on a commission or on a committee to start?
Sure. Well, didn't you run for council at one point? I thought so, yes. Yeah, just email, you can't make any guarantees, but at least you could be, send an email to mayor@okc.gov. Or actually, if you Google it, somewhere on our website, we actually have like a formal place to apply to be on boards and commissions. And do you still live in Ward 6? Get to meet Joe Beth if you haven't yet. And because some of the board appointments are driven a little bit by the council person. So, anybody else? All right. Well, thank you so much for having me today. Thanks for all you do.
Thank you so much for coming today, and I'm sure if you could just be available for perhaps a few minutes more, people are going to have some more questions. They are, I know it. I know it. So we are going to allow time for that, and we're just going to finish, of course, on our fun little note. If you will look under your chairs, we've got 2 lock boxes to be won. If the mayor wins one, he's going to have to give it back.